up, guys? In today's video, we'll be reviewing Dan Bilzerian's book, The Setup. There's a lot of hate on this book, and a lot of people are basically saying, oh, he's a trust fund this, like, oh, I don't care. They have all this negative emotion about Dan, but honestly, I don't really care because at the end of the day, he did do something that was very unique. He had a goal of wanting to create this adventurous, outrageous lifestyle that included partying. And he was able to do that. He was able to put together what he calls the setup, which is basically rigging the environment into your favor to get your desired goals or outcomes. All right. And always making sure that you have an edge at whatever table you're sitting at. By table, I mean in life or in the environment, the situations that you're in. And that's what the whole book is about. And he clearly does know how to create the setup. And so the title of this book is not How I Made Hundreds of Millions of Dollars. It's not how to sleep with all these women. This is not a step-by-step self-help book. This is just Dan's stories about what happened in his life, and he's just sharing his voice and perspective of what was happening to him from his own eyes. Dan has been able to create a lifestyle that very few men have ever created or experienced. His perspective at the end of the book on pleasure and happiness is probably one of the best things that he has to offer. I think that if he was ever to do a second book, he should specifically focus on that topic, because when Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or like Mark Zuckerberg talks about like, hey, like money doesn't make you happy, that's one thing to hear it from them. But then you're like, well, I don't think that they really lived the life that, Dan lived, like this outrageous, wild, adventurous, party lifestyle. And I'm not saying that everyone wants to live that way, but when Dan is straight up saying at the end of the book, hey, extreme amounts of pleasure, excess pleasure does not lead to happiness. That is probably the second biggest takeaway from the book. Excess pleasure does not lead to happiness. He is going to fall through a lot of periods where he's really depressed, where he's literally needs a therapist and needs to get out of his environment. He's doing a lot of drugs. He's sleeping with a lot of women. And it seems like it's very robotic or mechanical when he's with these women, because he's just like, I've always wanted this. So many guys want this. Why don't I want this anymore? I mean, there's even a story in the book where he's on a yacht with 50 models and there's just like a handful of guys, and he's like trapped himself in a room and he just doesn't want to be there. Like he can't wait to get off the yacht. And then later in the book, he talks about how he's having one of the best experiences of his life in Hawaii with just a few close friends and then a girl that he actually really likes. The pleasure versus happiness conversation, he can talk about that topic better. Like most guys have these childhood fantasies or these teenage fantasies of, living that outrageous lifestyle with all these models, money, celebrities, all that. He actually did it. And I don't care if he's a trust fund or not. I mean, he addresses in the book that he did have a trust fund, but it was not nearly worth as much as what people thought. He claims that he made it from poker, and he goes through a lot of the intense poker matches. A lot of people give claims to like, well, nobody's ever seen him play this poker because he's playing private poker games. Like he's not playing poker on TV. Like he's playing private poker games. I think they could be illegal. I'm not sure. He talks about Molly's game, which I think those were illegal celebrity card games. His whole thing with making money was, I want to use the setup, which is he wants to rig the environment into his favor by only playing poker with very wealthy people who aren't good at poker. And he could tell if someone wasn't good, and he would just be able to run circles over these guys. And they didn't really care about gambling and losing the money. They were just having fun gambling. I'm talking about the other rich people. Like they were playing 6-figure hands. They're playing 7-figure hands. I mean, there's even one story where he wins about $8 million in a round of full night of poker with this guy who was extremely wealthy. And at the very end, the guy goes like, hey, do you want to flip a coin for the $8 million? And heads or tails, 50-50. And you can either lose it all or you can double your money, just to show you what kind of a level of poker he's playing at, where these guys don't care about losing money. They have so much money and they're pretty much degenerates doing drugs that they don't really care, okay? Or at least that's Dan's point of view and how he was able to win so much money. And Dan's view on women is basically always make them chase you. The women are coming to him. Like he created an environment and a setup where women want him. They are the ones coming to his house, wanting to go into his room, wanting to get on the plane, travel the world. They're going on yachts with him, are voluntarily spending their time with Dan. He's not holding like some sort of carrot over their head where perhaps like Harvey Weinstein, where it's like, you're going to get into Hollywood if you, do something for me. He does share some basic things and foundational things that helped him have more success with women. Do not chase, do not pursue, create the environment and have high status and create ratios that are in your favor, basically meaning have more women than men, which he learned from his fraternity days. And it just sort of snowballed to the point where Dan had a fame level of power. And he argues that fame is more attractive and sexy than actual money, because there are men who have way more money than Dan, but they do not nearly have the lifestyle that Dan has. And there are people who actually have more fame and money than Dan, but what Dan has is the setup, and that's his advantage over all these other guys. He has stories with real rock stars. He's like hanging out with these rock stars after their show, and they basically are struggling with women, or there's only a few girls. Why doesn't this guy have the proper setup? And he sort of points out that he thought rock stars were living a different life. Dan's ability to create the setup is what gave him the power to have such an outrageous life where a lot of women wanted him. Now, the setup can be used in any aspect of life. Like, I took a good lesson in that, which is like, is the setup that I have in my life, is it serving me? And what can I do to create a setup in my life where I'm getting the type of results that I want? And I think that's what people need to take from the book. That's the biggest lesson. And the second one is pleasure does not lead to happiness. And for me, that was a huge release of stress, because he basically lived that life, and he's straight telling you like, hey, you don't need to live that life. And what does make you happy, in his words, is basically having goals and meaningful friendships, doing things that you care about with people that you care about. And it's all basic things. I think at one point in the book, he says the funnest things that he's done like really don't cost any money, because what happens with all that excess pleasure is the setup that he created actually starts to go against him. So I thought that was interesting, because in the beginning and in the middle of the book, the setup works really in his favor, and he's able to experience a life that very few men have ever experienced. But towards the end of the book, that same setup serves to go against him, where he has way too much pleasure and he's unable to hold on to long-term relationships. And you can tell that he's trying. You can tell that he wants to have a long-term relationship with these really awesome women, but he simply can't. There's too many women in his life. The setup he created has so many women that it makes it difficult for him to even hold on to a long-term relationship. Therefore, the setup is now rigged against him, because his goals and his desires have simply changed. And so I think that's important to understand how the setup that you create at one point might not serve you later. And so we constantly need to adapt our own setup to where we are at in our lives to ensure that the setup matches our vision and our values. Otherwise, you could be living really out of alignment from the life that you want. So I think that's a good way to look at that. Does your setup in life match your values and vision? And for Dan, it did, and then it didn't. And then he learned the lessons that he shares in pleasure versus happiness. I don't really care about the controversies, and I don't care how Dan made his money. I don't care about him playing poker. What I care about is those two things: the setup, which I thought is a great piece of advice because it clearly worked for him. And then the second piece on pleasure versus happiness. And a third lesson could really just be having a no F's given attitude and being able to walk away from situations and people that don't serve you. He learned early in life that not care so much about the approval of others versus succumbing to women. These are very attractive women. And so to see Dan be able to walk away from playmates and supermodels, he really is able to walk away because he created a setup that has abundance, and he didn't feel that he needed to hold on to any one woman, which not a lot of guys have in their life. Very few men have ever walked away or friend zoned a really attractive woman. Most guys are going to hold on to an attractive woman and hold on for dear life and put up with any negative behavior that she gives the man. And so he does not put women on a pedestal, and that seems to serve him well, where women are chasing him. Now, this is what the setup is missing, and what I think Dan could have done a better job on. This is not a step-by-step manual on how to create the setup, okay? He doesn't go into, this is how you do it, this is how it's done, make sure you don't do this. You simply can see how Dan used the setup, and then you get to read about the outrageous results from his setup. And so you kind of have to piece it together yourself, but he does not give you specific advice on how to create the setup in your own life. I think the book had too many stories about orgies and women. I understand that's his life, but there were so many. There's literally hundreds of pages of just reading orgies, and they all sound very similar. And after a while, I actually thought I was reading like a duplicate page. I was like, I'd forget what page I'm on because I'm like, haven't I read this before? I felt that I got the point after like the 10th orgy. And I think that the book could have had more meat into some of the lessons that he was learning along the way, and how other people could apply this into their own life. However, it is Dan, so you have to just sort of take it with a grain of salt. Like he's not going to create a personal development book here for guys step by. He's probably not going to do that. He just wants to share his life, address those controversies, and have a voice so that you can understand his perspective from his whole life story. I was hoping that Dan would have talked about marriage and long-term relationships. I'm really interested in his view on monogamy, polyamory, and children. I think he would have had some really insightful views on those topics that men would have found very interesting or helpful, or just to see a different angle, because he's experienced such wild experiences with so many attractive women. I think that could have been interesting for the book to include. The end of the book really takes him to where he's at right now with Ignite, his CBD company. And that's a publicly traded company, and you can review those financial documents. And it's clear that there's some challenges going on there. He doesn't address anything going on with Ignite in terms of its financial troubles, what is going on with that company, and how he's spending the money from his company to fund his personal life. At least that's what we're seeing online. Now, I don't know that that's true. I'm not making claims. It kind of makes me doubt whether or not that company is doing well or not if he doesn't talk about it. And at the end of the book, he doesn't really talk about where he's going next or what his vision for the future is. He ends with some good advice about the importance of the setup, how anyone can do it, and gives you this sort of motivational pep talk, which I actually liked. I'm not talking down on that. I thought the last few pages of the book were some of the best pages in the book. But he doesn't say what he's going to do, where he's going next. I think we're all curious to see, what is this guy doing next? What are some of his big goals? How is he going to leverage this incredible power that he's created into something even bigger? All we know is he's working on Ignite, and he's not so much into having the most outrageous parties. He feels like he stamped that part of his life, at least for now, is how he ends it. And my recommendations for Dan, if he's watching, or anyone from his team, would be this. On social media, I would challenge you to be more vulnerable and share more of the truth and your thoughts, because as I read your book, it really changed my view of you, Dan, because I just viewed you as this, extremely outrageous character who's living like this insane life, but I felt zero connection to you. But when I read your book and I was able to see your challenges, I was able to see you being picked on as a kid, I was able to see you struggling with women, throughout all of your early life. A lot of this started to make sense to me as to why you were so gung-ho about creating this outrageous life. It would really help the audience to see you as a real person. And you were vulnerable in the book. And I think being vulnerable on social media and sharing the truth and sharing your thoughts and sharing challenges and sharing things not always working out, and like you going through your journey, I think would really connect people to you. Because I think your social media is like, we don't connect to you, but we think what you're doing is so outrageous that we can't help but watch. But I don't know that there's a great deal of trust between you and the actual viewer. I thought that was one of the biggest shockers, is that Dan is actually in many ways like me. Now, I didn't have a trust fund. I totally get that, but I definitely did get picked on. I definitely did struggle with women throughout my early adult life. A lot of people can relate with that, because Dan has this strong desire to prove himself, to show that he's enough, to prove that he's worthy. And that's one of the biggest drivers that is fueling Dan's outrageous lifestyle. And so when we see that, I can almost root for Dan. I can say like, wow, he's doing it. Like, he made it. And if I had known that earlier, it would have changed my whole perception of Dan. And I think that it would have changed it for a lot of people as well. I just don't think the masses understand that they are very much like Dan. And Dan came from a place where he was hurting and in pain and struggling. And he used the setup to be able to create the life, and that was his solution to a lot of those painful struggles in the past. And so that's a story that many guys can connect with, and I think he should roll with that more. And guys, if you like this video, give it a like and subscribe, hit the bell notification so you can get more of my content. I'm spending a lot of time trying to add value to men and to help them become the strongest versions of themselves. If you want to go deeper with me, then go in the link in the description. I have a bonus training where I can share with you how to create an epic social life, how to create a really high quality romantic relationship, and how to become a stronger, grounded man with unbreakable confidence. Just go in the description, click the link. It'll take you to a training. Just put your email and then you'll get access to this hour-long training. I spent months creating that thing, so I think you're going to find it really valuable. Considering that Dan didn't give us the how-to inside the setup of how to create the social life and get the girl, I thought I'd give you a training on how you could do that. So just go in the description, click the link, and I'll see you guys in the next video.